here from ADA Minnesota. I do lots of presentations on the ADA. Today I'm just going to do a brief little overview of disclosure, because as John was saying, and the theme of the day is, how can we make the ADA and affirmative action be compatible? And really they are. So, and I will show you how. But first and foremost, I need to tell you that there are 5 titles of the ADA. Again, am I talking fast enough here?
You speed it up.
I'll speed it up. So, I know we're all coming in from different places. We have attorneys here and advocates here, but just so we all know, we're on the same page. There's 5 titles of the ADA. There's always been 5 titles of the ADA. Be happy to come into any of your organizations and discuss them. But for our purposes, I just want you to know that we're only going to be referring to Title I of the ADA, because that's where I think it's most important, as that's where the disclosure that I'm talking about would fit into. And Title I is for any employer. This is the federal definition, not the state. Is all employers that have at least 15 or more employees. I'm assuming if you have some state contracts or your state agencies, definitely you're going to have more than 15 employees. So, that being said, Title I, it refers to any aspect of the employment process. We are talking anywhere from the recruiting of employees, which would be your website. Let's say that you only do your recruiting on your website. You have to make sure, as an example, that your website is accessible to screen readers. Do you guys know what screen readers are? Fabulous, fabulous piece of software technology where it reads back on the screen, or reads back what's on the screen to people who are visually impaired. So if you don't make your website accessible to that type of technology, then you're discriminating against people with that type of a disability, and then you'd be out of compliance with Title I of the ADA. It goes all the way down to what people always forget about is the benefit of being an employee. Let's say you have an employee who's mobility impaired, and you had in your workspace, like this would be completely accessible. However, you just decide to do your holiday lunch celebration at a restaurant, and it's not accessible. You'd be out of compliance, because that would be one of the perks or benefits of any type of an employer-sponsored event. Or if you had your company picnic, and you had an employee who was hearing impaired, and once a month for staff meeting, you had an interpreter for them. You also have that interpreter for that company picnic. So again, it's from soup to nuts of employment. I also had mentioned hidden disabilities. Because I think it's important to bring this up in reference to disclosure, because people sometimes assume that the only people that have disabilities that would need to disclose, or they would need to accommodate, or that would fit into their accommodation for their affirmative action plan, would be people with visible disabilities. But I'm here to tell you that the largest percentage of people with disabilities are those with hidden or invisible disabilities. I would imagine if I asked you to raise your hand, but please do not, because I did a training once and people did, and then I had self-disclosure everywhere. It's not a good day for me. But if I were to ask you to raise your hand, I would bet a good percentage in this crowd would have some type of a hidden disability. Whether that would be considered a disability under the ADA is a whole different 2-hour presentation that I'd be happy to do for you, but not today. So just so you know, hidden disability, largest percentage of people with disabilities. When we're talking about disclosure, it's important. Now we're here to the topic of the day. I'm on track. So why would an employee disclose that they have a disability, hidden or otherwise? There's really only one reason that somebody would have to, a person with a disability would need to or be required to disclose that they have a disability. And that is if they are asking for a reasonable accommodation for their job. So in a nutshell, really that's be the only reason. Now there's 2 other reasons that somebody may choose to disclose that they have a disability. And that would be to receive the benefit or the privileges specifically for employees with disabilities. So what does that mean? Does that mean some companies have special parking spots, or they have clubs or groups? Yeah, they do. A lot of employers do, but it also means that maybe they are following an affirmative action plan. So that might be, the benefit or the privilege that, as a person with a disability, it would be something that would be advantageous for them to disclose in that way, or for one of the other benefits or perks. They don't have to, but that's a reason that somebody may. Also to explain an unusual circumstance or phenomenon. And so what does that mean? So let's say somebody is having some type of a reaction or some sort of something going on with their disability, and their employer does not know this. It might be somebody who maybe has a mental health concern, and they are readjusting their medications and they may be off. It may be somebody who has diabetes and their blood sugars are off, and their employer keeps asking them to do urinalysis because they think they're coming to work drunk. Personal example of this, which I have permission to use. My husband, so remember in 2008 when the stock market crashed? Remember that? Okay, so my husband's a stockbroker. It was not a good time. So in 6 months, he became gray overnight, and he became diabetic, but didn't know it. So he was not feeling well, goes to the doctor. Apparently his sugars were at 400. We had no idea what that meant. I think it is not good, now that I know. And the doctor said, oh my gosh, you have to quickly take this medication. We got to get those sugars down. So my husband, not thinking, takes it in the car, doesn't read the instructions. By the time he gets to work, doesn't realize that you will be violently ill if you don't take it with food. So he is so sick, his boss, thinks he's having a heart attack and is ready really to call an ambulance. What does he do? He discloses all over the place. She says, are you okay? No, I'm a diabetic. I've been doing this for like 20 years, and this is how my husband chooses to disclose. I've never. But in any event, he doesn't listen to me anyway. But in any event, really good example of a bad way to disclose. But he needed to because, one, he hadn't processed it yet, but two, he was not well, and he needed to explain what was going on so she didn't think something other than what it was. I'm sure in her head, a lovely person, but I'm sure she was thinking perhaps something worse. So that being said, that is disclosure. Disclosure, what benefit can come from disclosing? Well, the person could then receive the accommodation that they're requesting, or they could gain the protection under the ADA for anti-discrimination, freedom from harassment, freedom from intimidation. It's a positive thing in some cases for somebody to disclose because then they can get what they need and they're free from being scrutinized or harassed or intimidated. What can also happen, I have to be perfectly honest with you, I know we're keeping this upbeat and positive, but I get all the phone calls, and I can't make this stuff up of the phone calls that I get because that's what I do for a living. And sometimes disclosure does not go 100% how we planned. And the opposite may happen. They will get a demotion or a cut in hours, their shift changes, they're retaliated against, some of these things. Sometimes you don't disclose because you don't need an accommodation and you don't need to disclose, or that you just desire to be private about your disability. I will tell you that thank goodness for the ADA, it has many light layers to it, but if somebody does disclose and ask for an accommodation and they're retaliated in any way or harassed in any way, they are covered under the ADA for that as well. It's not a pleasant process, but I have to be perfectly honest with you that sometimes disclosure does not go as well as planned. What an employee may disclose, what information might they give you as the employer? They might give you general information about their disability or their impairment that is causing a limitation in a major life activity. They might tell you why they're disclosing. I'm disclosing because I understand you have a affirmative action plan, or I'm disclosing because I need an accommodation, or my medication is not correct. I need to take some days off to get that adjusted. How their disability may affect their ability to perform the key job tasks. They might tell you types of accommodations that have worked for them in the past, or types of accommodation they anticipate needing in the workplace. And right here now, I'm going to put a plug in for the Job Accommodation Network. Is anybody familiar with JAN? They are an unbelievable resource, free resource. They have like 17 or 18 staff. Each person is an expert in a different type of disability, and they have a whole database of different accommodations that work for actual folks that they have worked with in every type of disability impairment imaginable. So at this point, the employee, if I were the employee and I was disclosing and I needed an accommodation, I would have already called JAN or gone to their website to try to figure out accommodations that might work for me. The employee may disclose to, it's on a need-to-know who they might disclose to. It's on a need-to-know basis. The employee shall provide further details about their disability as it applies to their work-related accommodations. So it should maybe be the supervisor responsible for hiring them. It doesn't have to be everybody in the company. I just did a training this week for some state new supervisors, and somebody said, well, I was told that I needed to ask for my reasonable accommodation to disclose my disability to this list of people on this email list. There was like 6 or 7 or 8 people on that. It was everybody's supervisor up the ladder. And I said, well, who directly supervises you? They said, well, this person. I said, well, you can't be asked to disclose to everybody up the ladder, just pretty much the person that will be directly supervising you. Also, if you're a state agency, every state agency has an ADA coordinator. They have many other tasks that they're doing, but every state agency has to have some access to an ADA coordinator, and that might be somebody that you want to disclose to. Or the HR person. Sometimes if you work for a union, you can disclose to your union steward, and they can assist you in the process. But you can kind of choose at some point who you disclose to. I put this in here because I think it's so important what the EEOC says about disclosure, and I have it in bold or pink or something, that an individual with a disability